Marcus Reed stood before a half-circle of strangers, hands moving through the air with practiced fluidity. The afternoon light filtered through the community center's tall windows, casting long shadows across worn linoleum floors that had seen decades of footsteps. His fingers shaped the sign for love, 3 fingers, extended thumb and pinky tucked pressed briefly against his chest. The dozen students mirrored him, some smoothly, others with the stiffness of beginners still learning their bodies could speak. A woman in the front row fumbled, then caught herself, and Marcus nodded encouragement. Teaching American Sign Language had become his anchor these past 6 years, the thing that kept him tethered when grief threatened to pull him under. Someone raised a hand. Marcus pointed. "How did you learn ASL, Mr. Reed?" The question came every semester, inevitable as winter. Marcus let his hands answer before his voice did, signing as he spoke, a habit so ingrained he barely noticed anymore. "My wife taught me. She was born deaf, fluent since infancy. I learned because I wanted to understand her world, not force her into mine." He didn't mention the rest. Didn't explain how Sarah's hands had been the last thing he'd felt before the doctors rushed her into emergency surgery, how her fingers had trembled against his palm, forming the sign for promise, over and over, until the anesthesia claimed her. Some stories didn't belong in classrooms. The session ended at 3:15. Students filtered out their chatter, filling the hallway beyond the door. Marcus began erasing the whiteboard, wiping away the day's vocabulary. Family home together. Goodbye. The irony wasn't lost on him. Small footsteps echoed down the corridor, growing louder. Marcus turned just as 3 identical blonde tornadoes burst through the doorway, each clutching a stuffed animal like a security blanket against the world's sharp edges. Marlo arrived first, teddy bear tucked under one arm, her free hand already signing. "Daddy, we're hungry. Can we get pretzels from the vending machine?" Sinclair followed, Bunny's ears flopping as she ran. "Mrs. Chen said we were very good today and only talked during free time, not during math." Wren brought up the rear, her stuffed puppy's black button eyes catching the light. She signed without speaking, fingers moving in the fluid patterns that came as naturally to her as breathing. "Mrs. Davis asked if today is special. She wanted to know why you're picking us up early." Marcus crouched to their level, meeting 3 pairs of blue eyes, Sarah's eyes preserved in their daughters, like photographs he could hold. 6 years old today. 6 years since his world had split in two, before and after, since he'd become both mother and father in a single devastating moment. "Today is very special." He signed back, making sure Wren could follow every word. "It's your birthday, 6 years of light in my life. And yes, it's also the day Mommy went to heaven, but she would want us to celebrate you 3, not be sad." Marlo's face scrunched, processing this duality. She'd grown up with birthday candles and cemetery flowers, forever intertwined. "Can we still visit Mommy's stone?" "Tomorrow, Bug. Tonight we're doing something different, something special." Sinclair bounced on her toes. What is it?" Marcus stood reaching for his jacket on the back of the chair. The community center's heating system clanked and groaned, struggling against the October chills seeping through old walls. "Dinner. At a fancy restaurant." 3 mouths fell open in perfect synchronization. Marcus almost laughed. Almost. They'd been to McDonald's plenty, to pizza places with sticky tables and arcade games, but never somewhere that required reservations, somewhere with cloth napkins and prices that made his carefully budgeted paycheck wince. "Like where princesses eat," Marlo breathed. "Exactly like that." The drive across town took 20 minutes. Marcus's Honda Civic had seen better years. A crack spider-webbed across the windshield, the passenger seat's upholstery torn at one corner, but it ran, and that was enough. The girls chattered in the back seat, hands flying in excited conversation he caught in glimpses through the rearview mirror. Lumiere Restaurant occupied the ground floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and polished brass, utterly out of place in his world of grocery store coupons and stretched paychecks. Marcus had driven past it 100 times, never imagining he'd walk through those doors. But Sarah's parents had sent a check for the girl's birthday, and he'd decided just this once to do something extraordinary. The maitre d' looked them over with barely concealed skepticism, A man in khakis and a button-down that had seen too many wash cycles, 3 6-year-olds in their best dresses, stuffed animals in tow. "Reservation for Reed," Marcus said, voice steady despite the weight of judgment. The man checked his screen, eyebrows lifting fractionally. "Right this way." They followed him through a maze of white tablecloths and crystal stemware, past couples leaning close over wine business dinners conducted in hushed tones. Marcus felt every eye that tracked their progress, every subtle shift, as diners registered their presence. He'd grown used to stares 3 identical children tended to attract attention, but this was different. This was the weight of not belonging, of intruding on a world designed to exclude people like him. Their table sat near the kitchen doors, the least desirable spot in the house. Marcus didn't complain. He settled the girls in their chairs, helped them spread napkins across laps, and tried to ignore the prices on the menu when it arrived. A server materialized, young and practiced in the art of professional courtesy that masked boredom. "Good evening. Can I start you with some drinks?" Marcus ordered water for everyone, conscious of the budget already stretching thin. The server disappeared. Around them, the restaurant hummed with the sounds of expensive normalcy, silverware on china, murmured conversations, the distant clink of a wine bottle returning to its bucket. Marlowe's hands moved in the space between them. "Daddy, would Mommy like this place?" Marcus looked at his daughter, at the hope written across her face. Sarah would have hated it, actually. Too pretentious, too aware of its own importance. But Sarah would have loved being here with them, would have found ways to make the girls laugh, would have turned the whole evening into an adventure. "Mommy would love anywhere that had you 3 in it," he signed back. Sinclair studied the menu, puzzling over words she couldn't quite read yet. "What's consommé?" "Soup. Very fancy soup." "Can we get the chicken fingers?" Marcus scanned the children's menu, found the item, and suppressed a wince at the $18 price tag. "Sure, sweetheart." Wren had been quiet, her puppy clutched tight against her chest. Now her hands formed careful shapes. "Is it okay to be happy today?" The question drove straight into Marcus's heart like a blade between ribs. He reached across the table, touched her small hand gently. "It's more than okay. It's what Mommy would want most in the whole world. She knew every second she carried you 3. She loved you then, and she loves you now. That's why we celebrate, because you're her gift to me, and I get to unwrap that gift every single day." Tears pricked his eyes, but he blinked them back. Not here, not in front of the girls on their birthday. The server returned, took their orders with mechanical efficiency. Marcus requested the least expensive pasta on the adult menu, watched the numbers add up in his head. Rent was due next week. The electric bill sat unpaid on his kitchen counter. But this moment, these smiles on his daughter's faces, this mattered more than any spreadsheet. While they waited for food, Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolled to the photo album he'd curated over years. Pictures of Sarah holding infant triplets in the hospital just hours before surgery, laughing at a beach they'd visited the summer before her pregnancy, signing to the camera with her whole body expressing joy. He passed the phone to Marlowe, who studied each image with the intensity of someone trying to memorize a face she'd never seen with waking eyes. "Tell us the story." Sinclair asked the one they'd heard dozens of times but never tired of hearing. "About how you and Mommy met." Marcus leaned back in his chair, aware that nearby diners might overhear, not caring. "I took an ASL class in college because I needed language credits and it fit my schedule. Your Mommy was the teacher's assistant. First day of class, she stood at the front of the room and signed her introduction, and I didn't understand a single word. But I understood everything." "What did you understand?" Marlowe asked, following the familiar script. "That I was looking at the most beautiful person I'd ever seen, that I wanted to learn her language, her world, every single thing about her. So I studied harder than I'd ever studied anything, stayed after class, asked questions, made mistakes. Your Mommy was patient with me even when I signed 'I'm pregnant' instead of 'I'm embarrassed' in front of everyone." The girls giggled, a sound Marcus would bottle if he could preserve it against the inevitable march of time that would turn them into teenagers, then adults, then strangers with lives he could only glimpse. Wren's hands formed the question she always asked at this point. "Did Mommy know you loved her?" "I told her in the clumsiest ASL you've ever seen, probably signing that I wanted to eat her shoes or something equally ridiculous. But she understood. She always understood what I meant, even when my hands said something else." The food arrived, interrupting the story at its natural pause. 3 plates of chicken fingers, 1 bowl of pasta that would constitute tomorrow's lunch as well. The girls attacked their meals with enthusiasm, ketchup soon decorating napkins and fingertips. Marcus watched them more than he ate, cataloging this moment for the mental archive. He kept Marlowe's concentrated frown as she cut her chicken into precise pieces. Sinclair's tendency to eat all of one thing before moving to the next. Wren's quiet contentment, requiring no words. Across the restaurant, movement caught his eye. A woman in a red dress, elegant and severe, sitting at a corner table with a little girl who looked about the girl's age. The woman's blonde hair was pulled back in a style that suggested boardrooms and power lunches. But it was the little girl who held Marcus's attention. She sat utterly still, hands folded in her lap, staring at her untouched plate with an expression Marcus recognized instantly. He'd seen it in mirrors after Sarah died, in the faces of students struggling to bridge the gap between hearing and deaf worlds. Loneliness. The kind that hollowed you out from the inside. Marlowe followed his gaze, then elbowed Sinclair, who elbowed Wren. 3 heads swiveled in unison. "Daddy," Marlowe whispered, "that girl is using sign language." Marcus watched more carefully. The little girl's hands moved small and tentative, forming signs toward her mother. The woman signed back, though her movements carried the careful precision of someone who'd learned ASL as an adult, not absorbed it through childhood. The girl's hands shaped a familiar pattern. "Can we go home?" The mother's response, "Don't you want dessert? They have chocolate cake." The girl's shoulders slumped, a gesture of defeat that transcended language. Sinclair was already sliding out of her chair. "Girls, wait!" Marcus started, but they were gone, 3 identical determinants marching across polished floors toward the corner table. He watched, half rising from his seat, as his daughters approached complete strangers with the fearless confidence of children who'd never learned that the world might not welcome them. Marlowe spoke first, but all 3 signed in perfect synchronization. "Hello, my name is Marlowe. This is Sinclair and Wren. We saw you signing. Do you want to be friends?" The restaurant noise seemed to pause, or maybe that was just Marcus's perception narrowing to this single moment. The little girl in the red dress stared at his daughters, her eyes widening with something between shock and desperate hope. Then her hands moved fast and enthusiastic. "You can sign. Really sign. You're not pretending." "Our mommy was deaf," Sinclair explained, hands and voice working together. "Our daddy taught us her language so we could know her even though she's in heaven." The woman in red had frozen her face, cycling through emotions Marcus couldn't quite read from across the room. He navigated between tables, arriving just as Wren signed her usual shy introduction. "I'm Wren. We saw you sitting alone and thought maybe you'd like company. Everyone should have friends on birthdays." "I'm so sorry," Marcus said, addressing the woman. The words felt inadequate, small against the enormity of what his daughters had just done. "They saw your daughter signing and they don't have a lot of opportunities to meet other kids who use ASL." The woman looked at him, and Marcus felt the full weight of her attention. She was younger than he'd initially thought, mid-20s perhaps, with eyes that held the particular exhaustion of someone carrying too much for too long. "Don't apologize." Her voice came out rough, as if she hadn't used it much today. "Please, don't apologize." The little girl was signing rapidly to Marlowe now, a conversation unfolding in hand, shapes and expressions. Marcus caught fragments, favorite colors, favorite animals, questions about the stuffed toys. "I'm Marcus Reed," he offered. "These 3 troublemakers are mine. Isabella Monroe." She extended a hand, and Marcus shook it, noting the firmness of her grip, the expensive watch at her wrist. "And this is my daughter Ellery." Ellery glanced up at her name, then immediately back to the triplets as if afraid they might vanish if she looked away too long. "How long has Ellery been deaf?" Marcus asked quietly, keeping his voice low enough for privacy. Isabella's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 3 years. Car accident when she was 3. Traumatic injury to the auditory nerve. The doctor said— She stopped, shook her head. "It doesn't matter what they said. What matters is nobody talks to her." "Not really. Teachers, other parents, children at school, they either stare or ignore her. I've tried everything. Special schools where she's the only deaf child. Deaf schools where I'm an outsider. Nothing works." Marcus understood that particular species of grief, the kind that came from watching your child navigate a world designed without them in mind. "The girls don't have many deaf friends," he said. "Most of their exposure to ASL comes from me and from Sarah's parents. They've been asking for years when they'll meet other kids who sign." "Can we play?" Marlowe interjected, not bothering with preamble. "There's an ice cream shop 2 blocks from here. Daddy, can we go? Please?" 4 pairs of eyes turned to Marcus, then to Isabella. The hope in Ellery's face was almost painful to witness, raw and unguarded in a way that suggested she'd learned not to hope too often. Isabella looked at her daughter, then at Marcus, calculation visible behind her eyes, weighing risks, measuring trust. "I don't usually—" she began. "I understand," Marcus said quickly. "Stranger in a restaurant. But for what it's worth, I have 3 references you can call, including my direct supervisor at the community center where I teach. I'm not—" he paused, searching for the right words. "I'm just a dad trying to give his daughters what they're asking for, same as you." Something in Isabella's expression shifted, a fortress wall developing the smallest crack. "Ice cream," she said slowly. "In public, somewhere well lit. The place I'm thinking of is always crowded this time of night, right on Main Street." "Okay." She turned to Ellery, signing as she spoke. "Would you like to get ice cream with your new friends?" Ellery's face transformed, joy breaking across her features like sunrise after a long night. Her hands flew through a response too rapid for Marcus to catch entirely, though he gathered the essential message. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Marcus returned to their table, paid the check with his credit card, while trying not to think about next month's statement. The girls bounced with barely contained energy, already forming plans in quick signed exchanges that made them look like a flock of birds coordinating flight patterns. The walk to the ice cream shop took 10 minutes. October air had turned crisp, carrying the first real bite of approaching winter. Marcus walked slightly behind Isabella and the 4 girls, watching as his daughters flanked Ellery like protective guards, including her in their conversation with the easy grace of children who hadn't yet learned prejudice. Sinclair explained about their stuffed animals, how each one had a name and personality and specific bedtime requirements. Ellery listened with rapt attention, signing questions that Marlowe answered with enthusiasm. Wren, typically the quietest, seemed energized by having another child who communicated primarily through signing. Isabella walked stiffly, her posture suggesting someone prepared for danger from any direction. Marcus recognized that stance. He'd worn it for the first year after Sarah died, that constant bracing against the next catastrophe. "How long have you been doing this alone?" he asked quietly. She didn't look at him. 3 years. My husband died in the same accident that took Ellery's hearing." Marcus absorbed this, the arithmetic of grief tallying in his mind. Widow, single mother, daughter with a disability, all the same clubs he belonged to. "I'm sorry. There aren't good words for it." "No, there aren't." She paused at a crosswalk, pressed the button with more force than necessary. "People try. They tell me I'm strong, that I'm doing great, that my husband would be proud. But none of them know what it's like. None of them understand that I'd trade every dollar I have, every success, every achievement, just to see my daughter smile the way she's smiling right now." Ahead, the 4 girls had linked hands, Marlowe and Ellery in the middle, Sinclair and Wren on the ends, and were skipping along the sidewalk in careful unison. Passers-by smiled at them, charmed by the sight. "They're good kids," Marcus said. "Yours and mine both." "I run a company with 3,000 employees," Isabella continued as if he hadn't spoken. I negotiate million-dollar contracts. I sit in boardrooms with men twice my age and make them listen. But I can't give my daughter friends. I can't manufacture acceptance. I can't fix the fact that she's different in ways that make people uncomfortable. Different isn't broken. I know that, you know that. But the world— She gestured vaguely at the street around them, encompassing everything. The world hasn't figured it out yet. The ice cream shop blazed with fluorescent light, packed with families enjoying the evening. The girls rushed inside, pressing their faces against the glass display case, debating flavors with serious concentration. Marcus ordered for his three. They always got the same things, predictable as seasons, while Isabella conferred with Ellery in sign language, patient and attentive, in a way that made Marcus's chest ache with recognition. They found a table near the window. The four girls squeezed onto one side, leaving the adults to occupy the other. Marcus watched his daughters explain to Ellery the proper technique for eating an ice cream cone, lick around the edges first to prevent dripping, save the cone for last, with the solemnity of experts sharing trade secrets. "This is the kindest thing anyone's done for us in 3 years," Isabella said quietly. She hadn't touched her own ice cream, a small cup of vanilla that was already starting to melt. "Strangers being nice, I mean. People we don't pay to care." Marcus winced at the implication. "Is that what you think this is, being nice? Isn't it? My daughters saw a kid who spoke their language and wanted to make a friend. I'm just following their lead." "You're a better person than most, then." "I'm a single dad who teaches ASL for barely enough to cover rent. I'm not better than anyone. I'm just trying to survive one day at a time and give my kids something that looks like a normal childhood." Isabella finally met his eyes, fully really looked at him instead of past him. "What did you do before?" "Worked in a non-profit focused on deaf education. Sarah was my supervisor, actually. We met at a conference, started dating, got married young because we just knew. The pregnancy was a surprise. Triplets were a shock. And when complications started, we thought we'd handle them. We thought we had time." The words came easier than he'd expected, maybe because Isabella already understood the shape of his grief, even if the details differed. "Sarah made me promise at the end. Promise that I'd teach the girls to sign, that they'd know her language, that they'd carry her with them. So I quit the nonprofit, took the teaching job that offered more flexibility, and I've been keeping that promise ever since." "That must be exhausting." "It's the easiest promise I ever made." Across the table, Ellery had chocolate ice cream on her nose. Marlowe reached over with a napkin, wiping it away gently while signing something that made all four girls dissolve into silent giggles, that distinctive laughter of deaf children full of breath and joy, but no sound. Isabella's hand trembled slightly as she raised it to her mouth, and Marcus realized she was crying, not sobbing, nothing dramatic, just tears sliding down her face while her expression remained carefully neutral. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I don't cry in public. There's nothing public about this table, it's just us." She pulled a tissue from her purse, dabbed at her eyes with precise movements that suggested long practice at hiding emotion. "I've been trying so hard to fix everything, to be enough, to make up for what Ellery lost. And I can't. No matter how much money I throw at the problem, no matter how many specialists I hire, I can't give her what your daughters just gave her in 5 minutes. What's that? Being seen, not as the deaf kid, not as the CEO's daughter, just as Ellery." The ice cream was disappearing rapidly. Sinclair had started teaching Ellery a hand-clapping game, their fingers moving in coordinated patterns that required no verbal instruction. Wren and Marlowe were having an animated debate about which superhero would win in a fight, complete with dramatic gestures. "We should do this again," Marcus heard himself saying. "The girls, I mean. They should get to be friends." Isabella looked at him with something like wariness. "You don't know me. I could be anyone. You're a mother who loves her daughter and wants her to be happy. That's all I need to know. I'm also a CEO of a tech company. I have a very public profile. My life is complicated in ways that—" She stopped, seemed to reconsider. "I don't want to bring that complication into your world. My world already has 3 6-year-olds and whatever chaos they generate daily. How much more complicated could it get? A smile flickered across her face, brief as lightning. You'd be surprised. They exchanged phone numbers, a gesture that felt simultaneously momentous and ordinary. Just two parents coordinating playdates for their kids, nothing more than that. The walk back to the restaurant parking lot felt different than the walk there. The girls chattered the whole way, planning their next meeting before the first had even ended. Ellery kept looking back at Marlo as if afraid she was dreaming. At Isabella's car, a Tesla that probably cost more than Marcus made in 2 years, the girls hugged goodbye. Ellery signed something to the triplets that made them all nod solemnly, some kind of promise exchanged in a language Marcus had taught them to honor. "Saturday?" Isabella asked. "There's a park near where we live. Riverside Park. Do you know it?" Marcus knew it. Nice neighborhood. Houses that cost what he'd earn in several lifetimes. 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. He helped his daughters into the Civic, buckled them in while they continued signing to each other about the evening's events. The drive home took them through parts of the city where streetlights flickered and storefronts had bars on windows. Home was a rented duplex in a neighborhood gentrification hadn't reached yet, with paint peeling from the porch and a landlord who fixed things only when legally required. Marcus carried Wren inside while Marlo and Sinclair bounded ahead, their energy somehow renewed despite the late hour. Bedtime took an hour, pajamas, teeth brushing the arrangement of stuffed animals in their proper positions. Each girl needed individual time, individual attention, individual reassurance that they were loved. Marlo clutched her teddy bear, studying Marcus with Sarah's too perceptive eyes. "Daddy, did you like Ellery's mommy?" Marcus smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "She seemed very nice. She looked at you the way you used to look at Mommy in videos." "Sweetheart, we just met her." "I know. But maybe Mommy sent her to us. Maybe Mommy knew you were sad and wanted you to have someone." Marcus kissed her forehead, unable to form words around the sudden tightness in his throat. In Sinclair's room, technically all one room they'd divided with curtains and careful arrangement, Sinclair had a different question. "Is Ellery's mommy rich?" "What makes you ask that?" "Her car, her dress, the way the restaurant people acted like she was important." "Yes, I think she has money." "Does that matter?" Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, considering how to explain class and economics to a 6-year-old. "It matters in that we come from different worlds. She has resources I don't have. But it doesn't matter when it comes to being friends. You four connected because you share something more important than money. ASL, understanding. The feeling of being different and wanting someone who gets it." Wren's bed was last. She'd already arranged. Her puppy had her hands folded on top of her blanket, waiting. Always the quiet one, the observer, the child who processed everything internally before releasing it in careful, considered signs. Today was a good birthday. Her hands formed in the dim light from the hallway. "I'm glad, baby girl. But I saw you were sad at dinner, when we were talking about Mommy." Marcus should have known Wren would notice. She saw everything catalogued, every micro-expression, every shift in tone. "I'm always a little sad on your birthday, but I'm also so happy. Both things can be true at the same time. Like being hungry and full at once. Exactly like that." She considered this, her small face serious. "I think Ellery's mommy is sad and happy too, like us." "What makes you think that?" Her eyes. "They looked like yours when you talk about Mommy. Like she lost something important but found something new and doesn't know if it's okay to be happy about it." Marcus pulled her blanket up to her chin, marveling at how children could see straight through to truths adults spent years hiding. "You're very smart, you know that." "Mommy was smart. You said she could read people's hands like books." "She could. And you're just like her." Alone in his own bed later, Marcus stared at the ceiling and thought about Isabella Monroe's eyes, the way she'd cried silently over ice cream while her daughter laughed. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made 6 years ago in a hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and fear. He'd sworn to protect their daughters, to keep Sarah's memory alive, to never let grief win. But Sarah had also made him promise something else right at the end, when speaking took too much strength, and her hands could barely form the shapes. "Don't lock your heart because of me. Open it. Let someone in who deserves it." He'd signed back that he would, lying because she needed to hear it, never believing he'd have to make good on the promise. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for tonight. Ellery hasn't stopped signing about it. She's asleep now with a smile on her face. I haven't seen that in 3 years. Isabella." Marcus typed back slowly, thumb moving across the screen. "The girls are the same. Already planning Saturday in intricate detail. See you then." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "See you then." Marcus set the phone down, rolled onto his side, and stared at the framed photo on his nightstand. Sarah, heavily pregnant, signing "I love you" to the camera. She looked impossibly young, impossibly alive. The image always made him ache with the particular pain of knowing something was about to end, even as the moment was frozen in eternal present tense. "I met someone today," he said to the photograph, speaking aloud in the dark. "Her daughter is deaf. She's alone like I'm alone. The girls already love her kid. And I—" He stopped because putting it into words felt like betrayal, even though Sarah had released him from any obligation to eternal mourning. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm ready. But something happened tonight. Something that felt like maybe the universe trying to tell me it's okay to stop just surviving." The photo offered no answers. Only Sarah's eternal smile, her hands forever forming the words he'd needed most. Outside his window, the October night had turned truly cold. Marcus pulled the blanket higher, closed his eyes, and let exhaustion pull him down into dreams where Sarah taught Isabella to sign, and their daughters played in gardens that existed only in the country of sleep. Saturday would come, and with it whatever came next in a story he'd stopped believing could have new chapters. Saturday morning arrived, wrapped in the kind of autumn sunshine that made promises it couldn't keep warm, light cold air, the world caught between seasons. Marcus woke to the sound of his daughters already awake, their hushed whispers carrying through the thin walls of the duplex. The digital clock read 6:43, and he allowed himself the luxury of staying horizontal for another minute, staring at water stains on the ceiling that resembled continents he'd never visit. The girls had laid out their clothes the night before, matching lavender dresses that Sarah's mother had sent last Christmas, still crisp, despite multiple wearings. They'd insisted on coordinating on presenting a united front to their new friend. Marcus found them in the bathroom. They shared, Marlo helping Wren with her hair, while Sinclair brushed her teeth with the focused intensity she brought to every task. "We need to leave in 6 hours, Marlo announced as if this were breaking news. "I'm aware. That's 360 minutes. Also aware. 21,600 seconds. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching his daughters prepare for an afternoon playdate with the seriousness of generals planning campaigns. "What if she doesn't come?" Sinclair's question emerged around a mouthful of toothpaste foam. "She'll come. But what if she forgets? Or what if her mommy decides we're not good enough?" Marcus knelt beside her, waited until she'd rinsed and could meet his eyes. "Isabella won't forget. And you 3 are more than good enough for anyone." The morning crawled. Marcus made pancakes that the girls barely touched their stomachs, apparently too full of anticipation for actual food. He graded papers from his Thursday class while they played elaborate games involving their stuffed animals and what appeared to be an intricate judicial system for resolving disputes. At 11:30 they began asking if it was time to leave yet. At 12 they started putting on their shoes. "We have an hour," Marcus reminded them. "We could be early. We could also seem desperate." "Aren't we?" Wren's hands formed the question with brutal honesty. Marcus didn't have a good answer for that. They left at 12:45 anyway, unable to sustain the pretense of casual indifference. The drive to Riverside Park took 20 minutes through neighborhoods that grew progressively more manicured lawns, more expansive houses, more imposing. Marcus felt the familiar discomfort of crossing invisible borders between his world and places where people had sprinkler systems and 3-car garages. Isabella's Tesla was already in the parking lot when they arrived. She stood beside it, Ellery at her side, both of them scanning the incoming traffic. Isabella wore jeans today, expensive ones that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly grocery budget, and a cashmere sweater in deep blue. Ellery had on a red dress with white tights, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail secured with a velvet ribbon. The triplets exploded from the Civic the moment Marcus put it in park, running toward Ellery with shouts of greeting. Ellery's face transformed, joy erasing the careful neutrality she'd worn while waiting. The four girls converged in a tangle of hugs and rapid signing, picking up conversations as if the week between hadn't happened. Marcus approached more slowly, suddenly aware of his own worn jeans, the flannel shirt he'd owned since college, the shoes that needed replacing 2 months ago. "You came?" Isabella's voice carried relief that suggested she'd shared Sinclair's doubts. "Of course we came. I wasn't sure. People make promises to Ellery all the time. Play dates that get canceled. Birthday party invitations that turn out to be mistakes. I've learned not to believe in follow-through." The girls had already run toward the playground equipment, a massive wooden structure that looked like a castle designed by committee. Marcus and Isabella followed at a more measured pace, maintaining the careful distance of two people who weren't quite sure what they were to each other yet. "How was your week?" The question felt absurdly formal given that Marcus had spent half of Thursday thinking about the way Isabella's hands moved when she signed, the precision and grace that came from years of practice driven by necessity. Exhausting. Board meeting on Tuesday, product launch on Wednesday, crisis management on Thursday when our biggest client threatened to leave. The usual chaos. "What does your company do?" "You said tech, but that covers a lot of ground." "Digital security. We develop software that protects sensitive data for corporations, governments, healthcare systems." "It's—" She paused, seemed to reconsider whatever corporate pitch she'd been about to deliver. "It's supposed to make the world safer. Sometimes I think it just makes it more complicated." They reached a bench with a view of the playground. The girls had climbed to the highest platform, were engaged in some elaborate game that involved a lot of pointing and signing. Other children played nearby, occasionally glancing at the four girls with curiosity, but keeping their distance. "Your daughters are remarkable," Isabella said quietly. "The way they communicate. It's so fluid, so natural. You can tell it's not something they learned in a classroom." Sarah made sure of that. Even when she was sick, even at the end, she'd signed to them. She recorded dozens of videos before she died, bedtime stories, lullabies, just her talking about her day. The girls watch them sometimes. It helps them remember her voice, even though they only hear it through my translations. Isabella pulled her coat tighter around herself despite the sun's warmth. "Ellery doesn't remember what sound was like. The accident happened so fast and she was so young. Sometimes I wonder if that makes it easier or harder. No memory of before means no longing for it, but it also means she doesn't understand everything she lost." "She didn't lose anything that mattered," Marcus found himself saying. "She lost a sense, yes, but she's still Ellery, still whole. The world just needs to catch up to her, not the other way around." Isabella turned to look at him fully, and Marcus felt the weight of that gaze like physical pressure. "You actually believe that?" "I have to, because the alternative is believing my daughters lost something when Sarah died, that they're less than they should be, because they only had her for a few hours. And I refuse to let that be their story." A scream from the playground sent both parents to their feet, but it was just another child, someone unrelated to their daughters having scraped a knee on the slide. The girls noticed the commotion, Marlowe signing something to Ellery that made all four of them look toward the crying child, then back at each other. Some silent consensus was reached, and they climbed down from their perch. Marcus watched as his daughters approached the crying child. Sinclair already pulling tissues from her pocket. She always carried tissues, a habit picked up from him. Ellery hung back slightly uncertain, but Marlowe took her hand and pulled her forward. Together, the four of them helped the other child, showing her. The scrape wasn't too bad, offering comfort in the universal language of kindness that transcended words. "I've never seen Ellery do that." Isabella's voice had gone rough. "Reach out to another kid. She always stays separate, watching but never participating. She feels safe with your daughters, safe enough to be brave." Isabella's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, typed something rapid, then shoved it back in her pocket. Work. My brother. He's also my vice president. He wants to schedule an emergency meeting tomorrow about quarterly projections. On Sunday. The company doesn't care what day it is. Bitterness crept into her tone, subtle but unmistakable. Neither does Richard. He's been pushing me harder lately, questioning my decisions, undermining my authority in front of the board. I think he's positioning himself to take over if I show any weakness. Marcus understood family complications. Though his were different parents who'd stopped speaking to him when he married Sarah, unable to accept a deaf daughter-in-law missing their granddaughter's entire lives out of stubborn prejudice. Can you fire him? Isabella laughed, short and sharp. In theory. In practice, he owns 20% of the company and several board members are loyal to him. Firing him would trigger a vote that I might not win. So we maintain this delicate balance where we pretend we're not at war while slowly destroying each other. The girls had returned, bringing with them the child they'd helped, a boy around 7 with a bandaged knee and eyes still wet from crying. His mother followed, looking simultaneously grateful and concerned. Your daughters are very sweet. The mother addressed Isabella, apparently making assumptions based on proximity. Actually, Isabella started to correct her, but Marlowe was already signing enthusiastically to Ellery, and the misunderstanding resolved itself when the woman saw the hand movements. Oh, I didn't realize, are they all deaf? Isabella's spine straightened almost imperceptibly. My daughter is deaf. These 3 are hearing but fluent in ASL. They're teaching Ellery new signs. The woman's expression shifted through several stages. Surprise, discomfort, forced sympathy. Marcus had cataloged these reactions over years, knew them by heart. That must be so hard for you. Have you tried those implants I read somewhere they can fix? Ellery doesn't need fixing. Isabella's voice could have cut glass. She's perfectly fine as she is. The woman retreated with her son murmuring apologies that rang hollow. The girls, oblivious to the adult tension, had already moved on to a new game involving the swings. Isabella's hands trembled slightly. She crossed her arms, tucking them close to her body. I hate that. The pity. The assumption that Ellery's life is tragic, that I must be suffering through some noble burden. People don't know what they don't know, and they're scared of anything different. I'm so tired of educating strangers, of defending my daughter's existence, of pretending every interaction isn't a minefield. Marcus understood that exhaustion too, the particular weariness that came from constantly advocating, explaining, justifying choices that shouldn't require justification. The afternoon unspooled in small moments. The girls teaching Ellery a hand-clapping game that required perfect synchronization. Wren sharing her puppy with Ellery and receiving an elaborate thank you, signed with formal precision. Sinclair and Marlowe staging an elaborate dramatic production that seemed to involve knights and dragons and a lot of falling down. Other families came and went, some staring, some deliberately not staring, none engaging. Around 3:30, Marcus suggested getting coffee from the food truck parked near the parking lot. Isabella agreed, calling the girls down from the jungle gym. They walked together, the 4 girls forming their own unit ahead, Marcus and Isabella trailing behind like satellites in their orbit. What's it like? Isabella asked suddenly. Raising 3 alone. I only have 1, and most days I feel like I'm drowning. It's like being a plate spinner in a circus. You get 1 stable, another starts wobbling. By the time you fix that one, a 3rd is about to crash. You learn to prioritize, to accept that some things will break, that perfection is impossible. But you make it look easy. Marcus laughed, genuine amusement breaking through. I promise you it's not. You saw my car. The passenger seat has duct tape holding the upholstery together. I meal prep on Sundays because otherwise we'd eat cereal for every meal. Last month I forgot Marlowe had a school project due, and we spent 2 hours at midnight building a diorama of the water cycle out of cardboard and food coloring. But they're happy. Your daughters are happy. Most days. Some days they cry because they miss their mother and I have no answers that help. Some days they fight over stupid things and I want to lock myself in the bathroom. But yeah, mostly they're okay. Isabella ordered a latte that cost more than Marcus typically spent on groceries for a day. He got black coffee, basic and functional. The girls pooled their requests: hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, and found a picnic table to colonize. "Ellery asked me this morning if she could have sisters." Isabella's voice had dropped low enough that only Marcus could hear. "Not metaphorically. She wanted to know if I could give her siblings like yours have each other." "What did you tell her?" "That I'd think about it," which was cowardly. "The truth is I can barely manage one child in a company. Adding more would mean admitting I can't do both, and I'm not ready to make that choice." Marcus sipped his coffee, considering his words carefully. "You know you don't have to do both, right? You could step back from the company, focus on Ellery. You clearly have the resources." Isabella's jaw tightened. "And be what? Just a mother. Let everything I built crumble because I couldn't handle the pressure. Being just a mother isn't a consolation prize. It's the hardest job there is." "Easy for you to say. You didn't build a billion-dollar company from nothing." The words landed like a slap, and Isabella's face immediately registered regret. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Marcus kept his voice level. "And you're right. I didn't build an empire. I teach ASL for $45,000 a year and drive a car held together by hope and prayer. But I also get to see my daughters every day, know their friends, help with homework, be present for the small moments that don't seem important until you look back and realize they were everything." Isabella set her coffee down precisely, her fingers white-knuckled against the cup. "I don't know how to be just one thing. I've been proving I could do it all since my husband died. If I stop now, what was it all for?" Marcus wanted to tell her she was asking the wrong questions, that she'd already lost the plot by measuring success in quarterly earnings instead of her daughter's smiles. But he'd learned years ago that people only heard advice when they were ready to receive it. The girls were drawing in the dirt with sticks, creating elaborate pictures they described to each other in sign. Ellery had dirt on her white tights and didn't care, completely absorbed in explaining something to Wren that required both hands and exaggerated facial expressions. "She's going to hate leaving," Isabella observed. "Tomorrow she'll wake up and remember she doesn't have this. That school is full of children who ignore her teachers, who pity her, a mother who's never around because she's too busy being important. So change it. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You just don't want to do the simple thing because it means admitting you chose wrong." Isabella stood abruptly, coffee forgotten. "You don't know anything about my choices. About the pressure I'm under, the people depending on me, the responsibilities that don't disappear just because parenting is hard." Marcus stood too, meeting her anger with calm he didn't entirely feel. "You're right, I don't know. But I know what your daughter looks like when she's happy versus when you picked her up at the restaurant last week. And I know which version of her I'd choose if I were in your position." They stood in tense silence while the girls continued playing, unaware of the adult drama unfolding at the edges of their joy. Finally, Isabella's shoulders dropped. "I'm sorry. I'm not usually. You don't deserve my anger just because you're saying things I don't want to hear. We all defend our choices, especially the ones we're not sure about." Isabella looked at her daughter, really looked as if seeing her for the first time. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Terrified that if I step back from the company, Richard will destroy everything I built. Terrified that if I don't step back, I'll miss Ellery's childhood. And most terrified that I'll make the wrong choice and won't realize it until it's too late to fix." Marcus understood that species of fear, the paralysis that came from too many bad options. Sarah used to say that regret came in two flavors: things you did and things you didn't do. The second kind is always worse because you can't even learn from it. What would she tell me to do? She'd tell you that companies can be rebuilt, but childhoods can't. That money means nothing if you're too busy earning it to enjoy what it buys. That your daughter won't remember your quarterly earnings, but she'll remember whether you showed up. Isabella's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "I hate that you're probably right." "I'm definitely right. The only question is whether you're brave enough to act on it." Before Isabella could respond, Ellery ran over, signing urgently. Marlowe translated her voice, carrying across the space between families. "Ellery wants to know if we can have a sleepover. All of us together. 4 pairs of eyes turned to the adults, hopeful and expectant in the way only children could be, unaware that logistics and propriety stood between them and their desires. "That's," Isabella started. "A great idea," Marcus heard himself finishing. "But we'd need to plan it properly. Make sure everyone's comfortable." Sinclair bounced on her toes. "We could stay at Ellery's house. She probably has a giant house with lots of rooms." Isabella's expression flickered embarrassment maybe, or discomfort at having her wealth highlighted so casually. "We do have space, but I'd need to check my calendar, make sure—" "Next Friday," Wren interrupted, signing as she spoke. "No school on Saturday, so we can stay up late." Marcus met Isabella's eyes across the picnic table. "Only if you're sure. That's a lot to take on." "It's 4 little girls. How chaotic could it be?" Marcus almost laughed at her naivety, but managed to turn it into a cough. "You have no idea what you're agreeing to." "Then I'll learn." The girls erupted in celebration, already planning elaborate activities that would probably bear no resemblance to whatever actually happened. Marcus gathered trash from their impromptu picnic while Isabella checked her phone the 20th time that afternoon, a habit he'd noticed but hadn't commented on. "I need to go," she announced, tension creeping back into her shoulders. "Richard just sent 3 emails flagged urgent. If I don't respond, he'll use it as evidence of my negligence. On a Saturday afternoon at a park with your daughter. The company doesn't recognize boundaries between work and life. I learned that the hard way. Getting Ellery to leave required negotiations worthy of international diplomacy. Promises were extracted. Hugs exchanged, a schedule for next Friday's sleepover tentatively established. Ellery clung to Marlowe until the last possible moment, signing a promise to text using the messaging app Marcus had helped Isabella install that converted sign language to emoji. Driving home, the triplets replayed every moment of the afternoon in exhaustive detail, their hands flying in the back seat as they debated who had climbed highest, whose hot chocolate had the most marshmallows, what Ellery's house might look like. "Daddy," Marlowe's voice cut through the chatter. "Are you going to marry Ellery's mommy?" Marcus nearly swerved into the next lane. "What, no? We just met her last week." "But you like her." "I barely know her." "You looked at her the way you look at mommy in pictures." This again. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, searching for words that wouldn't lie but also wouldn't encourage 6-year-old matchmaking fantasies. "Isabella is a nice person who I respect. We're friends because you 3 are friends with Ellery. That's all." "But you could marry her," Sinclair pressed. "Then Ellery would be our sister for real." "That's not how it works." "Why not?" "Because adults don't get married just so their kids can have siblings. Marriage it's complicated." Wren's hands formed careful shapes in the rearview mirror. "Mommy would want you to be happy. She said so in the video. The one you think we don't know about." Marcus's throat constricted. The video Wren referenced had been Sarah's final message to him, recorded 2 days before the emergency C-section. He'd watched it exactly once then, hidden the file deep in a folder he pretended didn't exist. "How did you find that—" "We were looking for the birthday video from when we turned 3. We found the other one by accident." Marcus pulled into their driveway, killed the engine, and turned to face his daughters. "That video was private." "We know. We're sorry," Marlowe offered, genuinely contrite. "But Mommy was right. You should be happy. And you smiled more today than you have in forever." Marcus had no response to that. No defense against 6-year-olds who saw through every wall he'd constructed. He ushered them inside through the routine of dinner preparation and homework they'd somehow accumulated over the weekend. But Marlowe's observation lingered unwelcome and accurate. He had smiled more today. The week that followed developed its own rhythm. Text messages with Isabella became daily occurrences. First, just logistics about Friday's sleepover, then expanding into conversations about work, frustrations, parenting challenges, the 1,000 small moments that made up their separate lives. Marcus found himself waiting for her messages, checking his phone between classes in a way he hadn't done since high school. Tuesday evening his phone rang instead of chimed. Isabella's name on the screen sent his pulse jumping inexplicably. "Hey, I need advice." Her voice carried stress like a physical weight. "Richard called an emergency board meeting for Thursday. He's pushing a vote to restructure the company, which is code for reducing my authority. I think he's finally making his move." Marcus settled onto his couch phone, pressed to his ear, listening as Isabella outlined a corporate drama he only partially understood. But he grasped the essentials. Her brother wanted her power had been building. Alliances was using her devotion to Ellery as evidence she couldn't handle the job. "What do you want to do?" Silence stretched across the line. "I don't know. Fight, probably. Rally my supporters, show Richard he can't win. But I'm so tired of fighting. Tired of proving myself to people who will never be satisfied. And for what? So I can keep a title that requires me to sacrifice everything else." "Then don't fight." "You can't mean that." "Why not? You said it yourself, you're miserable. The job is eating you alive. Ellery barely sees you. What are you actually protecting?" Isabella's breathing filled the silence, rapid and shallow. "Everything I built. My husband's legacy. The company we started together." "Daniel's dead." Marcus spoke gently but firmly. "And I say that as someone who understands. Sarah's dead. We can honor their memories without letting those memories run our lives. That's easy to say from the outside. It's harder to say from the inside, which is why you need to hear it. Isabella, you're one board meeting away from having the choice made for you. At least if you walk away on your terms, you control the narrative. Walk away. Just abandon everything. Or walk toward something better. Toward your daughter. Toward a life that doesn't require you to be two people simultaneously." Another long pause. Marcus heard ice clinking. She was pouring a drink, probably standing in her undoubtedly enormous kitchen, staring at walls that cost more than his annual salary. "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." "Marcus." "Yeah. Thank you for being honest. Most people just tell me what they think I want to hear." "I'm not most people." She laughed, and the sound eased some knot in his chest he hadn't realized had formed. "No, you're definitely not." Thursday afternoon, Marcus was grading papers when his phone buzzed with a news alert. He almost ignored it. He'd learned to avoid most news, finding it depressing and useless, but Isabella's name caught his eye. "Hart Digital CEO Isabella Monroe resigns effective immediately. Brother Richard Monroe named interim CEO." Marcus stared at the headline, rereading it 3 times to make sure he'd understood correctly. The article was brief, professional, quoting a press release about pursuing new opportunities and spending more time with family. No mention of board battles or corporate intrigue. His phone rang before he could decide whether to text or call. "You quit." No greeting, just the bald statement. "I did." Isabella's voice carried something he hadn't heard before. Lightness, maybe. Relief. "Walked into the board meeting, delivered my resignation, and walked out before Richard could even process what happened." "How do you feel?" "Terrified. Exhilarated. Like I just jumped off a cliff and I'm either going to fly or crash, and I won't know which until I hit bottom. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Check back with me in 6 months. If I'm completely unraveled, I'm blaming you." "Fair enough. The sleepover's still on for tomorrow, right? I need something to focus on that isn't the 17 missed calls from business reporters." "Still on. I'll bring the girls around 7. "Marcus, I'm scared. I've been CEO since I was 22. I don't know who I am without that title." "You're Ellery's mother. Start there." Friday evening arrived with the kind of anticipation that made the girls vibrate with barely contained energy. They'd packed bags with enough supplies for a week-long expedition despite the sleepover lasting exactly 12 hours. Marcus drove through neighborhoods that grew progressively more exclusive until Isabella's address led them to gates, actual gates requiring a code to enter. The house beyond was everything Marcus had imagined, and worse, sprawling modern architecture, floor-to-ceiling windows, a driveway that could park a dozen cars. This was Isabella's world, the one he didn't belong in, made manifest in steel and glass. Isabella answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair in a messy bun, looking more like a college student than a recently resigned CEO. Ellery bounced beside her, practically glowing with excitement. The girls disappeared immediately, Ellery leading them on a tour that Marcus suspected would take considerable time given the house's size. He stood awkwardly in the entryway, overnight bag in hand, feeling acutely out of place. "I ordered pizza," Isabella announced, "and rented 3 movies the girls picked out, and bought enough snacks to feed a small army. I may have overcompensated." Welcome to parenting. Overcompensation is the default setting. She led him through rooms that belonged in magazines, all carefully curated beauty with no evidence anyone actually lived there. The kitchen alone was bigger than Marcus's entire duplex, gleaming appliances that probably cost more than his car. "I know what you're thinking," Isabella said quietly. "I doubt that. You're thinking this is obscene, that no one needs this much space, this much luxury." Marcus considered lying, decided against it. "I'm thinking your house is beautiful and completely impersonal, like a hotel suite designed for someone who never stays." Isabella flinched. "Daniel designed it. He had very specific ideas about how things should look. After he died, I kept everything exactly the way he left it. I didn't know what else to do. Maybe it's time to change things. Make it yours and Ellery's instead of a museum to someone who isn't here. You don't pull punches, do you? Life's too short for anything else." 6 weeks had passed since the first sleepover at Isabella's mansion. 6 weeks of careful phone calls and chaperoned playdates, and pretending their relationship existed solely for the benefit of 4 little girls who'd decided they were sisters. Marcus had gotten skilled at ignoring the way his pulse jumped when Isabella's name appeared on his phone screen, at maintaining appropriate distance even when everything in him wanted to close the gap. The board meeting happened on a Thursday, which meant Marcus learned about Isabella's resignation the same way the rest of the world did, through a breaking news alert that made his phone buzz during his afternoon ASL class. He excused himself, stepped into the hallway and read the statement 3 times before believing it. Isabella Monroe, CEO of Heart Digital since age 22, had resigned effective immediately. No explanation beyond corporate platitudes about pursuing new opportunities and spending time with family. His hands shook as he dialed her number. "You really did it." Her laugh came through, breathless, almost giddy. "I walked in, delivered my resignation letter, and walked out before Richard could even process what happened. He's probably still sitting there with his mouth open. How do you feel?" "Like I just jumped off a cliff. Terrified and exhilarated and waiting to see if I land or crash." They'd talked for an hour after that, Isabella pacing her enormous house while Marcus sat in his car in the community center parking lot, both of them circling around feelings they weren't quite ready to name. When he'd finally returned to class, his students had covered for him, claimed he'd been needed for an emergency, protected him with the loyalty he'd earned over years of patient teaching. Friday arrived wrapped in November cold, the kind that promised winter lurking just beyond the calendar's edge. The girls had been planning this sleepover with military precision this time at Marcus's duplex, which meant Isabella would finally see how the other half lived. Marcus had cleaned obsessively all week, though he couldn't disguise worn carpet or the kitchen that barely accommodated 4 people. Isabella's Tesla looked absurd in his driveway, a vehicle worth more than his annual salary parked beside his 15-year-old Civic. She emerged carrying grocery bags that probably cost triple what he normally spent wearing jeans that had never seen a discount rack. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. The girls claimed his living room for an elaborate blanket fort, while Marcus taught Isabella to cook actual food instead of reheating prepared meals. She massacred vegetables with endearing incompetence, asked questions about every step, absorbed his instructions with the same intensity she'd probably brought to board meetings. They ate cramped around his small table elbows, bumping conversation flowing. Isabella looked overwhelmed by the proximity, the chaos, the sheer aliveness of family dinner in tight quarters. After the girls retreated upstairs, Marcus and Isabella stood at his kitchen window, wine glasses in hand, talking about everything and nothing until words became insufficient. The kiss happened without planning, without preamble. One moment they were standing apart, the next, Isabella had closed the distance, and her mouth was on his urgent and desperate and tasting of wine and 6 years of loneliness finally finding outlet. When they'd pulled apart, both breathing hard, Isabella's hands had trembled against his chest. "We can't do this, not with the girls upstairs." "Then we wait. Take it slow." She'd left shortly after, but not before exchanging promises to figure out what this was, what it could become. Marcus had fallen asleep that night with hope burning in his chest for the first time since Sarah died. Sunday shattered that hope into pieces sharp enough to draw blood. His phone erupted with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. 17 missed calls before noon, all from reporters who'd somehow learned about his friendship with Isabella. The voicemails ranged from politely inquisitive to aggressively demanding, but all circled the same questions. Were they dating? Had their relationship influenced her resignation? What did a community center teacher offer a billionaire CEO? Isabella faced worse. By her count, she'd received 43 calls from various media outlets, all fishing for scandal in the waters of her personal life. Richard leaked it. Her voice carried exhaustion that went bone deep. "He's trying to undermine my resignation by making it about romantic scandal instead of professional choice. What do we do? Nothing. We don't confirm, don't deny. Within a week, some other story will replace us." But Isabella's confidence proved catastrophically misplaced. By Monday morning, the story had metastasized across business news, social media, anywhere people gathered to dissect the lives of the wealthy and fallen. The headlines grew progressively worse with each iteration. Hart Digital's fallen queen inside Isabella Monroe's secret romance with struggling teacher. The articles danced around defamation laws, implying without stating, suggesting without confirming. They detailed Marcus's modest salary. His status as widowed single father painted him as either opportunistic gold digger or Isabella's catastrophic lapse in judgment, depending on which narrative served the outlet's agenda. Tuesday brought consequences. Patricia called Marcus into her office wearing the expression of someone about to deliver news she hated. The board met this morning. They're concerned about reputational damage. Donors are asking questions about that teacher involved with Isabella Monroe. Until this settles, they want you to take leave. You're suspending me for having friends. I'm protecting the center's funding. I'm sorry, Marcus. 2 weeks minimum, possibly longer. The girls faced their own scrutiny. Marlo came home crying after classmates asked if her daddy was dating a billionaire. Sinclair got into a shouting match defending Isabella's honor. Wren simply stopped signing in public, retreating into protective silence. Wednesday evening, Marcus sat in his darkening living room while the girls slept upstairs, staring at his phone and the decision it represented. He could call Isabella, tell her they needed distance until the storm passed. Protect his daughters from scrutiny they didn't deserve. Choose safety over possibility. His phone rang before he could make the choice. Isabella's name lit the screen. "I'm coming over." "Isabella, it's 9:30. "I don't care. We need to talk, and I'm not doing it over the phone." She arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing what she'd probably worn all day, yoga pants and an oversized sweater hair and a messy bun, looking nothing like the polished CEO from magazine covers. Marcus led her to the kitchen, poured coffee neither of them would drink, and waited. Richard isn't stopping. Her hands wrapped around the mug like seeking warmth from a dying fire. "He's feeding stories to reporters, providing them with details about our meetings, the sleepovers, everything. He's building a narrative that I quit because I was too distracted by romance to run the company properly." Why does he care? He got what he wanted. He's CEO now. Because destroying me isn't enough. He needs me humiliated, needs everyone to believe I failed. And he's using you, using us to do it. Marcus leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So we give him nothing. We stop seeing each other until interest dies." Isabella's head snapped up. "Is that what you want?" "I want my daughters to have normal lives. I want them to go to school without being interrogated. I want—" His voice cracked. "I want to be with you, but not if it costs them their childhood." Isabella set down her mug with deliberate care. I've spent 3 years letting fear make my decisions. Fear of failing Ellery, fear of losing the company, fear of being judged. I'm done. If Richard wants a war, I'll give him one, but I'm not sacrificing this," she gestured between them, "for his vendetta." "What are you proposing?" "Transparency. We stop hiding, stop pretending we're just parents coordinating playdates. We confirm we're together and dare anyone to make it scandalous." "That's incredibly brave and potentially disastrous." "Probably both. But I promised myself when I quit that I'd stop living for other people's approval. I'm choosing you, Marcus. The question is whether you're choosing me." Marcus crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her with 6 years of loneliness and need pouring into the contact. When they broke apart, Isabella's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "I'm choosing you. But if this backfires, if the girls get hurt, then we'll handle it together. That's what partnership means." Thursday morning, Isabella posted on social media for the first time since her resignation. A simple photograph, her and Marcus with the 4 girls taken at the park weeks earlier, everyone laughing at something outside the frame. The caption was equally simple. "Family isn't always biology. Sometimes it's who shows up, who stays, who teaches your daughter that different isn't broken. I'm grateful for all of it." The post went viral within hours. Comments ranged from supportive to viciously cruel, but the narrative had shifted. This wasn't secret scandal. This was 2 people building something new from the wreckage of loss. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "That was either brilliant or career suicide. Board meeting tomorrow. Be ready." Friday's board meeting happened without Marcus present, but Patricia called him immediately after. "They voted. You're reinstated effective Monday." Apparently, several major donors contacted the board after Isabella's post threatened to pull funding if we punished you for having a personal life. "You've got powerful friends now." Marcus felt relief and resentment in equal measure, relief at keeping his job, resentment that it took billionaire intervention to protect him from consequences of simply existing. That evening, all 6 of them had dinner at Isabella's house. The girls ran wild through rooms designed for showing rather than living, their laughter echoing off surfaces that had been silent too long. Marcus and Isabella cooked together in her enormous kitchen, their movements developing the synchronization of practice. "Richard's lawyer sent paperwork today." Isabella stirred sauce with unnecessary violence. "He's contesting my exit package, claiming breach of contract. It'll be months of litigation, possibly years." "Let it. You've got resources to fight, and he's already lost the only thing that matters." "What's that?" "You. He thought destroying your reputation would destroy you, but you're standing in your kitchen cooking dinner for your daughter. You've already won." Isabella set down the spoon, turned to face him fully. "I'm falling in love with you. I tried to keep it friendly and appropriate. But watching you with the girls, seeing how you've built a life from nothing, learning that strength doesn't require hardness." She stopped, swallowed. "I'm falling, and I'm terrified because I've already lost one person I loved." Marcus pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I'm terrified too. But Sarah made me promise not to lock my heart because of her. And I think Daniel would want the same for you. We can honor their memories and still choose to live." 6 months slipped past in a blur of integrated lives. School pickups, shared dinner tables, combined holidays, celebrated together. The girls became inseparable, finishing each other's sentences in both speech and sign. Marcus and Isabella navigated the strange dance of blending families, learning to parent as team rather than parallel individuals. Richard's lawsuit dragged through courts while media interest slowly faded. Other scandals replaced them, newer dramas captured attention. Life settled into rhythms that felt almost normal. On a Tuesday in late spring, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at the community center. Diana Hartwell, looking frail and diminished, nothing like the board member who'd pressured Isabella to resign. "Mr. Reed, I was hoping we could talk." Marcus led her to his office, small and cluttered with teaching materials. Diana sat carefully as if movement caused pain. "I'm dying. Lung cancer stage 4. 3 months if I'm lucky. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm here to confess, not receive sympathy. She pulled an envelope from her purse, placed it on his desk. I hired the reporter who broke your story, Jennifer Caldwell. I fed her information about your relationship with Isabella, suggested angles that would maximize scandal. I wanted Isabella destroyed for daring to walk away from the company. Marcus stared at the envelope, processing this revelation. Why are you telling me this? Because dying clarifies priorities. I've spent decades accumulating power and wealth, sacrificing relationships and integrity for success. And now I'm leaving it all behind with nothing but regrets. She pushed the envelope toward him. That's proof. Emails, payment records, everything you'd need to sue me into oblivion. I won't contest it. Consider it partial restitution for damage I caused. Marcus opened the envelope, scanned documents that would indeed destroy Diana's reputation and estate. What do you want me to do with this? Whatever you think is just. But before you decide, I need you to understand something. Diana's voice wavered. Isabella reminds me of who I was before ambition consumed everything else. She had the courage to walk away while she still could. I stayed until I had nothing left but money and regrets. Don't let her become me. After Diana left, Marcus sat alone with the envelope, weighing options. He could destroy her claim, legal damages, make her final months miserable, or he could choose differently. He called Isabella. Diana Hartwell just confessed she orchestrated our media nightmare, gave me proof, essentially handed me her fortune. Silence stretched across the line. What are you going to do? I'm going to shred it. She's dying, Isabella. Revenge won't undo what happened, but mercy might teach our daughters something valuable. You're a better person than I am. I'm just someone who's learned that holding grudges only poisons the person carrying them. That weekend, Marcus took the girls to visit Sarah's grave for the first time in months. They brought flowers, arranged them carefully, signed messages to the mother they'd never consciously known. Daddy. Marlowe looked up from tracing Sarah's name on the headstone. Is it okay that we love Isabella? Does that mean we're forgetting Mommy? Marcus knelt beside his daughters, gathering them close. Love isn't limited. Your hearts are big enough for both. Mommy would want you to have as much love as possible from as many people as possible. Isabella doesn't replace her. She's just someone else who loves you, and that's only good. Wren's hands formed careful shapes. Are you going to marry her? Would that be okay with you three? 3 identical grins answered before hands could. Marcus proposed on a Saturday morning in June in the kitchen of Isabella's house that was slowly transforming from museum to home. No elaborate planning, no dramatic gestures. Just Marcus on one knee while Isabella made pancakes, the girls giggling from the doorway where they'd been spying. I'm not offering perfection or easy answers. I'm offering partnership, co-parenting chaos, and someone who sees you, really sees you, not the CEO or the money or the mistakes, just Isabella. The ring was simple silver engraved with "Love Needs No Words," a reference to the ASL that had brought their families together. Isabella's hands trembled as she signed "Yes," before speaking it, tears streaming down her face, while 4 little girls erupted into celebration. The wedding happened in September, small and intimate, in the garden of Isabella's house. 50 guests, mostly family and close friends who'd supported them through scandal and judgment. The ceremony was conducted simultaneously in English and ASL, every vow signed before being spoken. Marcus's vows came from months of practice, hands moving with Sarah's grace. Isabella, you taught me that moving forward isn't betrayal, that building something new honors rather than diminishes what came before. Sarah gave me 3 angels. You've given me permission to live again, not just survive. I promise to be present, to be honest, to parent beside you rather than parallel to you. I promise to see Ellery as whole, not broken, and to teach our daughters that love transcends every boundary society tries to impose. Isabella's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. Marcus, you showed me that success isn't measured in quarterly earnings or stock prices, but in whether my daughter smiles when I come home. You've taught me that vulnerability is strength, that asking for help isn't failure. I promise to keep learning, keep growing, Keep choosing presence over achievement. I promise to honor Sarah's memory by living the fullness she wanted for you." The 4 girls served as flower girls, each carrying signs spelling out, "Love, Hope, Family, Forever." When Marcus and Isabella kissed as newly married partners, the entire gathering erupted in ASL applause, hands waving in the air, creating waves of silent celebration. Richard attended, arriving late and leaving early, but his presence suggested something shifting. Perhaps Diana's death the previous month had clarified his priorities too. 10 years collapsed and expanded simultaneously, the way time does when you're actually living instead of merely enduring. The girls grew from 6 to 16, that awkward space between childhood and adulthood where everything feels simultaneously urgent and eternal. Marlowe became student body president, fierce advocate for accessibility and inclusion. Sinclair discovered talent for programming, built apps that translated ASL in real time. Wren wrote poetry that won national competitions, her words carrying weight her voice sometimes couldn't. Ellery transformed from lonely outsider to confident young woman who gave speeches about disability justice, who taught ASL to anyone willing to learn, who carried both Isabella's determination and Marcus's patience. The presentation happened on a Friday in November, scheduled for Deaf Awareness Week at the high school. All 4 girls attended. Marcus and Isabella sat together in the auditorium, hands intertwined, watching their daughters prepare to address an audience of peers and parents. The 4 teenagers stood together at the front of the stage, holding stuffed animals worn soft by years of love, teddy bear bunny puppy, and the elephant Ellery had received for her 7th birthday. Ellery signed while her sisters translated in rotating harmony, their voices blending. "When I was 6, I thought being deaf meant being alone forever. I was the girl nobody wanted to play with, whose difference made people uncomfortable. Then 3 girls walked up to me in a restaurant and asked if I wanted to be friends. Not in spite of my deafness, not to be kind to the disabled kid, they just wanted to be friends." Marlowe took over the narration. "Our mother died giving birth to us. We never heard her voice, only knew her through the language she left behind. That language became a bridge to our mother's memory, to each other, and eventually to a sister we didn't know we needed." Sinclair continued, "Our parents taught us that family isn't biology. It's who shows up when life gets hard, who learns your language, whether that's ASL or the language of grief or just the unique dialect each person speaks, who stays when staying is harder than leaving." Wren finished. "We're standing here today because 10 years ago some adults were brave enough to choose love over fear, presence over perfection. They showed us that blended families work when everyone commits to understanding rather than judgment, to listening with hands and hearts instead of just ears." Ellery's hands moved through final thoughts while all 3 sisters spoke in unison. "Disability isn't something to cure or pity. Grief isn't something to hide. Difference isn't something to fear. They're all just parts of being human. And being human is hard enough without spending energy pretending we're something we're not. Our family works because we stopped pretending. We started showing up honestly, vulnerably, completely. That's what we're asking you to do. Show up for each other. Learn each other's languages. Choose love over fear." The auditorium erupted in applause, both traditional and ASL, creating a sound and motion that suggested hope might actually be transmittable, that 4 teenagers and 2 imperfect parents had somehow cracked the code on making broken things whole. Marcus turned to Isabella, signed "I love you" with practiced fluency. She signed back, "Always," her eyes bright with tears that came from joy rather than sorrow. Behind them, Richard sat with his wife and 2 young daughters, teaching them basic signs he'd learned over years of slow reconciliation. Diana's death had broken something in him, made space for healing. They weren't close, probably never would be, but they'd achieved something resembling peace. After the presentation, the 6 of them gathered at the house that had transformed from showcase to home. Marcus cooked dinner while Isabella helped, their movements synchronized through years of practice. The girls set the table, bickering about whose turn it was for dishes normal and beautiful in their chaos. Over pasta and salad, conversation ranged across colleges and career plans and the 1,000 decisions looming for teenagers approaching adulthood. Marcus and Isabella offered guidance tempered by hard-won wisdom. That perfection was myth, that mistakes were inevitable, that the only real failure was refusing to try. Later, after the girls retreated to Ellery's room for whatever elaborate games 16-year-olds played, Marcus and Isabella stood in the garden where they'd married a decade earlier. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "Walking away from Heart Digital, choosing this life instead?" Isabella considered the question seriously. "I regret that it took me so long to see what mattered. I regret the years Ellery spent lonely while I chased validation through quarterly earnings. But this," she gestured toward the house, toward the laughter spilling from upstairs windows, "this is the only success that actually counts. Building a life where the people I love know they're loved, where our daughters feel safe being exactly who they are, where we've created space for grief and joy to coexist instead of pretending one must eliminate the other." Marcus pulled her close, breathing in the evening air tinged with autumn's approach. "Sarah would like you. She'd appreciate your refusal to settle, your insistence on honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Daniel would like you too. He'd respect how you've built something meaningful from limited resources, how you measure wealth in relationships rather than revenue." They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned that love wasn't about completing each other, but about choosing to build together despite or maybe because of their imperfections. Upstairs, four girls who'd started as strangers and become sisters were planning their futures, arguing about college choices and career paths and whether they'd live together or separately. Their voices carried on the evening air a symphony of hope and possibility. Marcus and Isabella had learned what Sarah and Daniel never got the chance to teach them, that grief doesn't end, but it transforms, that broken things can heal into new shapes, that family is whatever you build when you're brave enough to keep building despite fear. The story that had started with three girls asking a lonely child if she wanted friends had evolved into something larger, a testament to showing up, staying present, choosing connection over isolation. Four daughters who'd learned to see strength in difference, beauty in imperfection, family in the people who learned your language. Love didn't need words, as Marcus's ring had promised 10 years earlier. It just needed people willing to listen with more than their ears, to speak with more than their voices, to build bridges across every divide that society insisted was permanent. That night, Marcus fell asleep beside his wife in the bedroom they'd created together in the house that had finally become home, while four daughters slept peacefully down the hall, proof that sometimes the smallest hands really do mend the biggest hearts.